All right. Well, welcome back. We are the community of wisdom seekers, and we are in episode 13. So, lucky number 13. And we have Sam in the house, and she is sharing with us her wisdom on budgeting. And I know in this season that we're in right now with the COVID crisis and all the things going on financially, there really can't be a better time for us to start to look at our finances and budgeting. I am excited personally because this is an area I have not been good at discipline wise. And over the years, just have not found a method that works well or that I want to put energy into. And so tonight I am hopeful Sam has answers for me as well as for all of you. And I know we'll all get something from it. I met Sam through social media, LinkedIn actually. We ended up connecting face to face over coffee. And I just loved her energy, loved her spirit. She was just an awesome individual. She's a mother, she's a wife. She's also a business owner of many years, owning a fitness studio in town. And now she is in the financial advising space. So that being said, thank you so much, Sam, for being on. And I will let you have the stage to teach us how to budget now and in the future.
All right. Well, thanks so much for the glowing introduction. And I think the caffeine maybe helped with my energy at the time. And I'm not afraid to say that that is my energy go-go juice of choice. So, because finances can be intimidating. We're kind of brought up in this mindset of scarcity instead of abundance mindset when it comes to our finances. And I'm really hoping to inspire, motivate with a little bit of strategy in there as well for not only this COVID-19 space, but in this season, but also afterwards. We do have the time and hopefully still have some energy to move the needle in a way that yields for you and your family financially. So I have 5 main things that I wanted to jump on here and discuss. The first one being trying to answer the question, why even budget? Why do we need to spend the time, the energy, and the resources to do that? Well, if you don't like that word budget because it makes seem intimidating or it might seem boring, call it something else. I don't care what you call it. I think of it as a pathway toward goal setting, toward me reaching my goals personally, professionally, my family's goals, and those types of things. So the goal setting part is really super important, and that's what the budget can do. Because how will you know that you're there if you never set the destination? How will you know if you even got there? If you don't know, you'll constantly have this feeling of being discontent with where you're at. And we want to have a place of peace and understanding of where we are now and where we want to be. So that's really important just to set the stage for budgeting in general. But there are 3 main reasons why I feel like we fail at keeping budgets. And maybe fail is a strong word, but I'm just here to shoot it to you straight. The first one is we really tend to focus on how we feel instead of seeing the truth. We don't want to look at our credit card statements. We don't want to see what our student loan balance is, how much we still have to pay on that, our mortgage, how little it feels that we have income coming in. We get wrapped up in our feelings instead of really being objective and subjective with that information. I read a quote that said, "You can't be successful and delusional at the same time." You really need to hold the mirror up to yourself and your finances and maybe sit quietly while looking at all of this information, because how are you going to know if you got there if you're kidding yourself the whole process? It's so really take the time. I feel like that's why some of us fail with keeping with our budgets, because we don't get a good footing on where we're at to begin with. The second one is budgeting does take a little bit of time, but it is 2020 and moving forward, technology is only going to help us more in this area. Now, if you're a pen and paper type of person, awesome, do that. But just be honest with yourself on what you realistically are going to keep up with. I'm not a pen and paper type of person for this in this area of my life. I'm going to use apps to help me. And I do have some apps that I like, but it's really not my opinion. It's what are you going to use consistently? That's all that matters. So instead of trying to shove a square peg in a round hole and I have to use this Excel sheet because that's what I was told to do, or that's what my friend does, and they seem like they have a lot of money, that won't work. It won't last long term. So just use what you feel is going to be the best vehicle to help you keep track of your budget. Now, it does still take a little bit of time to lay out the foundation of your budget, and I'll kind of speak to that a little bit later. But after you get the framework in place, then it's just minor tweaks. You shouldn't have to overhaul the whole thing over and over and over again. It wastes time. It just drains your energy. So once you get a good solid outlook of what that budget is, just tweak it along the way. So right now you might have a type of budget for this season of life. Then maybe you start to have more abundance and experience more settling financial situation in the future. Then you just make minor tweaks along the way. And then number three, the third reason why I feel like some of us fail at keeping our budgets is our why or our goal is not specific enough and it's not strong enough. I feel like you really have to be able to taste, feel, and visualize what you want out of your life in this financial space without dwelling on it. But the reality is that money does make the world go round. You know, we still have to pay our bills and we still have to, you don't have to obsess over it, but your goal should be tangible enough that it keeps you going even when your motivation is waning. So my why, I'll just be open and honest with you. This is the time to get more emotional about that. In the beginning, when you're looking at all your statements, be objective. But when you're really trying to dig in those moments of weakness, remember your why. For me, it's definitely my kids for their future, but it's also to pay homage to my parents and my grandparents. I grew up in very humble beginnings, and my grandpa had told all of us, he was like, I was in the Korean War, it was freezing cold, it was the winter time, and I never wanted my family to ever be that cold ever again. And wow, if I don't do something with my life, if I just squander everything that I have, he would be rolling over in his grave saying, I worked so hard for, you know, his kids or my parents' generation, for me as his grandkids, and I want to pass that on. And there are people in my family who have changed their stars. I like to say, just because you were born in a certain situation doesn't mean that you're there forever. And through budgeting, you can very well have change your stars and the stars of your kids and generations to come by making little tweaks now and empowering them to make better decisions in the future. So that's my why. And it has to go really deep so that you can hold on to it and come back to it in those moments when your motivation is not so strong. Because we all have those times too. Now, one of the more strategic things I wanted to talk to you all about was my favorite type of budgeting, which is called zero-based budgeting. That means that every cent has a job. Every dollar that you make and that hits your bank account has a job. Diving in a little bit deeper into that, for me, and this is just my situation, I live by what I call the 70% rule. And this is not a novel, this is not an original concept. There are a lot of folks that have their own version of this, but it's 70% of my income is what I live on. It's my daily and monthly expenditures. It's food on the table, it's utilities, it's putting gas in the car, it's daycare, it's clothes, it's those types of things. Now that leaves 30%. So for me and for some people that I work with, they use 20% as savings. And again, your why has to be strong enough to encourage you to consistently put that 20% into a separate bank account. For me, it's a separate bank account, and sometimes it even needs to be a separate bank. Maybe it's more like a credit union. Maybe it's more of an online bank where it's actually more difficult and more inconvenient to take that cash out, so you don't touch it, right? And maybe you label it something fun. Maybe you label it Disney cruise. Maybe you label it new car. Whatever it is, put a name to it. It's like a living, breathing account that you are feeding consistently, however often you get paid, right? And then the last 10%, Some people like to tithe that. Overall, I would say charitable causes is a great way to label that, and maybe you go to a specific one. Maybe you have your kids help you name a specific one that they find value in, because again, we're talking about systemic family lines of having generational debt instead of generational abundance. So you want to kind of disseminate that information down to your kids and the younger generations, because they will get in a habit of contributing to charities and giving back to the community. So 70% is what you live on, 20% is savings, label it, make it fun. And then 10% is like tithing or charity or something like that, some sort of foundation that you can give back. Now, one of the questions that a lot of us have is, okay, I did my budget and I put my parameters in my app of I need to live off of 70%, but my expenses right now, if I'm being honest and I'm not being delusional with myself, is I actually spend more like 80%. That's really what my paycheck is paying for, 80%. In that case, boom, you just found your first goal, I think. I think you just found your first goal. And how can you shave 10% out of your living expenses? Great opportunity to research different car insurance providers. Maybe it's shopping at more of a Aldi, Sam's Club kind of situation, depending on how many people you need to feed, rather than making small little trips several times a week to the grocery store. There are some frugal living tricks and tips that you can use that can help shave off whatever percentage difference you are away from living off of 70%. But it's really important to pay down that debt. It's really important to try to do those things before you really start putting in 20% into savings. But once you can get that sweet spot of 70, 20, 10, you'll really start to see a big change in not only how you feel about money. I think you'll increase your contentment and just feeling satisfied and safe with your current situation. So I think you found your first goal if you're outside that 70%. And then the fifth and last thing that I wanted to share with you is kind of strategy, kind of motivation, but think of it as a workout partner. You need an accountability partner. Maybe that's a spouse or a partner, close friend. Maybe it's not. Maybe honestly, it's someone you don't even know. Maybe you have a cousin that you'd love to reconnect with and they live in a different state. Great opportunity, because they're going to be objective with you just like you're going to be with them. They have no skin in the game, and they're really going to be there to hold you accountable from a distance. But I hope that you can grow in having honest communication about finances within the family unit. But sometimes it takes a while, several months or even several years, to be able to have good, in-depth, vulnerable conversations about money. So having an accountability partner, either here within your family, in some sort of community, is always great, because think of it just like a workout. Sometimes it takes a little practice. Sometimes you slip up. Sometimes you miss a day. And you want to be able to have that person that you can be honest with, and they will do the same with you. So those are the main points when it comes to budgeting. Again, some strategy, some motivation, because really it starts with mindset, and then you can have the strategy to go along with that. So with that, again, I really thank y'all for entertaining me and blessing me with your presence. And I really hope that you're able to implement some of these things today and into the future, and you feel more at peace and can sleep better at night, knowing that you have a plan for whatever the next phase of life is.
Awesome, Sam. Well, thank you for that. And I will say that I love how simple it is, and really that is the truth. It is simple. So
It can be. It's simple in concept, but so is eating vegetables. And we don't do that, sometimes it's simple in concept, but it can be tiring. It's the long-term game, right? And so that's the piece of the puzzle that sometimes we don't give ourselves. We don't give ourselves enough time to see the fruits of our labor really come to light.
It's awesome. So The question I have is, I have a couple, and actually we had someone ask, what are some apps that you do recommend that
Mhm.
you like, and maybe a place to go find some apps that would be reputable?
Yeah, I really like Mint. They have like an actual website, mint.com. I like that because it's just a bigger screen. I like to be able to really see the graphs and the charts because I'm a number person. But they have an app as well, which is great. And it works really, really quickly. So if you purchase something, boom, you see it in the app and see how it affects your budget and your progress. I really like that one. There's also Clarity Money. And that's a great one too. There are some apps similar to Clarity Money that they will give you alerts. If you are honest and you put in all of your account information and all of your recurring subscriptions, it will remind you, oh, Sam, remember you signed up for that 30-day free trial. It's almost up. You need to cancel it. It'll give you these alerts to help hold you accountable, almost like a digital coach, accountability coach. If you're honest on the front end, you have to make sure that you put in all of those accounts and all of those recurring payments. Or ABC Mouse, a lot of parents are using that and they got it at a discount right now because of homeschooling or wanting to keep the kids entertained. And they got it on a discount. If you put that in, like Clarity Money or another app like that, it'll give you those alerts to make sure to cancel.
That's awesome and so helpful. I know how often I don't unsubscribe. So
Yeah,
that,
and that's how they get you.
yeah,
You can live frugally that way where you can take advantage of those discounts, but you really have to be aware of when they expire.
that's good. Um, what's the best way to start the conversation with your spouse? If you're wanting to have the conversation with a husband or wife, you haven't been budgeting, you would like to go in that direction. What's the way to get into that combo?
hmm I think there's a few different ways, and it really depends on what kind of personality you have and what kind of personality they have. Are they just more analytical and they just want to see the numbers? Then maybe a strategy would be you come halfway prepared already, so that you all aren't figuring it out in that space right then and there. Maybe come almost like a job, like you come with the proposal, like don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. And maybe you have to wear more of a business hat with that type of personality because that's what resonates with them. I told you guys I like the charts. I like to see what is this money projected to do in a chart. I need a picture, and maybe you need something like that. And then sometimes you honestly, just like with maybe marriage counseling, that people in my position, we kind of do that as well, where you have almost like a mediator asking the right kind of questions in the right kind of environment. I've also heard strategies from others where they will talk about money in public, not where they are talking loud enough for everybody to be in their business. However, I think if we're honest with ourselves, when you're at a restaurant or you're at the library, your emotions are only going to get so high, right? So it keeps the emotions kind of lower and calmer, and you're in public, so nobody's going to act crazy. And that's a really good space to talk. And don't underestimate the value of like a shorter 10-minute conversation, a shorter 15-minute conversation over a longer period of time. We're all at home together, so this would be a good opportunity to do that. Don't feel like you have to do all the things all at one time. Pace yourself.
It's great. And while we're on that topic, what's the percentage of divorces that point to financial issues where there's disagreement in that, or just the financial strain?
Yeah, quite a bit. I don't know the statistics on that. I would be really interested to know. But what I will say to that, speaking to that, is I think when divorce is an issue, it's more of there's an underpinning issue already, and finances really just throw logs on the fire,
Yeah.
right? And again, one of my missions is really to simplify, take the guesswork out of these simpler concepts like debt management and budgeting. So then when we're talking about protecting your income and retirement and these bells and whistles up here, you've had healthy conversations along the way, and you've set a goal together on what you want that future to look like. So yeah, it has to be a pretty high percent, divorce is a high percentage anyway,
Mhm.
but I don't know if finances is the only thing, but it definitely doesn't help if you don't have a good relationship with money.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing. I think the stat is pretty high that most that do end in divorce, it's either that or there's one other thing I can't think of right now that are the main issues. But I also would agree that the financial strain puts this extra stress on us that really kind of makes the volcano erupt, so to speak. So there's already other
Absolutely.
things going on. It's not just the finances, but I think that's a great part of it. I will say I got a question. So I think one reason I've struggled in the past is that I've been 1099. I've been commissioned only for most of my career. The
Hmm.
last year, it's been a little bit of a base salary and then I get commission. So now I can do this 70-20-10. But what if someone is only commission or heavily commission? How do you navigate that? Because I think that's really what I've wrestled with the most.
Hmm. Yeah. So whenever you're setting up your budget, you're going to have to look farther back into the vault a little bit on what a more macro view of what you're spending and what your income looks like, and then piece it and parcel it out moving forward. So for people who have like a traditional W-2 hourly or salary job, it's a little bit easier. You can look back maybe 30 days minimum, 60 or 90 days. It's pretty consistent. I would go back 3 months even with them, but if you do have more of a commission-based job, I would go back, make sure you have, honestly for myself, because I'm in a similar situation, I've been a entrepreneur or a 1099 type of employee almost all of my adult life. So um, you have to look back minimum 6 months, and then if not, a year for sure, especially if you have more of a seasonal job. And that's going to help you really stretch that seasonal job to provide you more income throughout the year if you don't have something lined up or you have an emergency, those types of things. It gives you a much better picture.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. And I guess if you make more outside of that, it'll just be extra to put towards other things. And I guess that's probably a little bit more advanced. But if you are, let's say, under that 70% mark with your, your living expenses, what do we
Mhm.
do with the extra? Where do you recommend people put the extra?
Yeah, so it really just depends on where your heart lies. Honestly, if you want to make up for lost time and in a way that you weren't able to provide a charitable way, you could definitely do that. I would hesitate to say to stop saving or to spend more. I think you need to have a happy medium where you can enjoy life now, but also be prepared for the future and have goals in line down the line too. And those goals can very well change. You can change the label on that savings account or having multiple savings accounts. Maybe it's one for each child. Maybe it's a vacation one. That's four right there. In my household at least. And so I would say to not spend more, but really feel content where you're at. And there's also a saying as well that resonated with me is I'm willing to live how others won't, so that in the future I can live how others can't. And that's not to say I'm trying to keep up with the Joneses. It's just I want to feel content. I start going back to that word contentment, because honestly, a lot of people, even though they make 100,000, 200,000, $1 million a year, they've just increased their level of spending and they still feel like they're the same. They still just have more debt, bigger problems, right? And so you really have to look inward and see what's of value to you and balance it between the here and now and the future.
Good. Thank you. So another question, when we're figuring out a bank to put our money with and let them be a steward of it for us in the time. Credit union versus a more global commercial bank. Is there a difference? What do you recommend?
It depends on, I feel like I answer all the questions with start with, it depends because it is so specific, right? To each individual. I can just give you some stats. I like banking with a global bank for some things because I like the technology. I like the big boat that they're in. They can hold a lot. For some, it's easier to get lines of credit because they have the cash flow to do that. They have the big vault to do that. Credit unions are great because sometimes they can provide you a little bit higher interest rate on your savings accounts. Inflation is usually between 2 and 3%. So if you can put a savings account in something that's at least keeping up with inflation, that's great. And then middle ground, I also love small hometown banks. I grew up in a town of 500 people. Our bank in the town was a trailer, and you can just go up, everybody knows your name. It's great. I do like those smaller banks, those family-owned banks too. So I personally use a variety for different reasons. Some of them are tactical, strategic reasons, and some of them are more warm and fuzzies.
Nice. Another question here with credit scores. So someone's starting out, they don't have any credit, younger generation. What are some options to get the credit going that are?
Credit is like a muscle. I go back to my health and fitness and strength and conditioning days, and it's like a muscle. You have to exercise it. It's kind of don't hate the player, hate the game. Unfortunately, a lot of us were like, "Oh, cash is king. It's great," but this is still 2020, where that number says a lot about you in the financial space sometimes. So you have to exercise it like a muscle. You use just enough of it to exercise your credit, but paying it down. Okay, so you don't want to overload it. And there are some statistics, it is a little bit more advanced, but there are some percentages of your credit that you need to exercise to encourage your credit score to go up. So for me, with my credit card, I still use it up to a certain amount of my total allowance that the bank gives me. So I exercise within this window here, and that builds that muscle, and I see my credit score continue to go up. If they see that you're constantly maxing it out, they get a little nervous about that because they're wondering, oh, wow, like, are they going to be able to pay that down? So use it, think of it as a muscle, really exercise it, but don't overload it so that you have a financial injury. If I can say it like that.
It's good. I like that thought, because if you get a financial injury and you're in that and you're using max capacity, you're going to be in a position where it's hard to dig yourself out of. And
Exactly.
I can relate with that personal experience where I did that to invest in a few things and thinking I'd be able to dig myself out, and things didn't come as I thought, as anticipated. And I just wasn't able to, and I had to surrender to a lot of help to get myself out of that. And
Right.
just could have been a lot better had I taken the advice you just gave.
Well,
So
I really appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing some little nuggets about your life, because this is what's going to help move the needle as a collective, is having financial conversations be normal conversations. And in my household, growing up, some conversations were really open about finances, but at the same time, my mom was like, "Don't be digging in my purse." Like, it was very like conservative, like, oh. So I want a happy medium if I have anything to do with it.
yeah, that's good. Well, it's interesting. A lot of things that we struggle with, that's the above the norm that should be common conversation. We don't have it, right? And there's different reasons behind it. I get it. At some level, I think it's, wanting to put a little bit of a front on, a little bit of a mask. I know that's what it was for me. I wanted people thinking I was doing better than I was, and the truth was I wasn't. And so that's just a natural human characteristic. Even when God came to Adam and Eve after they had sinned, they were blaming other things, and we're like, dang it, but they were
We
caught. And
have
that's the truth. It'll
that's
catch up with you. This catches up with you. Like, if you don't deal with
yes.
it, that's what I realized. Like, if I don't have a plan with my finances, it's going to catch up with me. And it's just like anything, like you mentioned at the beginning, if I'm not going into it with a plan, a strategy, and like an outcome I'm after, then I'm going to just end up getting whatever it gives me, which is usually not that exciting.
Right, exactly. And you bring up a good point too about feeling like I tell clients that I work with, don't go broke trying to save money. What I mean by that is, I have a friend who was like, "Oh, I got a brand new couch. It was $1,000 off." No, you spent 2,500. you know
Yeah.
so it's a mind switch that needs to stay on a low simmer. I think we have these ebbs and flows, but if you can just stay in a low simmer, then in the long run, we'll be better off when making those types of decisions and having that mindset about money.
That's good. Awesome. Well, we do have one more question. Should credit cards get paid off every month? I think they're asking like 2-0. Should you pay them all the way down?
In my opinion, I think so. I don't necessarily work in that space. I've just seen the outcome of it. So my professional advice and encouragement is to do that. So you get in a habit of exercising that credit, using your credit cards for what you need, not for necessarily everything that you want, and keep your goals in sight so that, again, your why is strong enough to keep you going when your motivation is not. And so when it comes to your credit cards, I would just personally suggest to pay it down to zero if you can, because you can always exercise it back up again.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I would definitely reach out to someone who you trust in that specific space, or the bank or credit card company that you have that with, uh, rather than take my word for it 100%. I want to empower you all to make healthy decisions when it comes to your money. And part of that empowerment is seeking out the right people in the right spaces.
Awesome. So I will say for those that are listening, so from Faith to Influence, my boss in the company, he's taught something that him and his wife have done for a couple of years now, and they have a giving account that's specifically set up to just use for charitable reasons. So like you were talking about that 10%, and one year they did 20. So 10 was tithing and 10 was giving back. And they put that 10% out Alley Bank, and they're online. I don't think they have physical locations, but they have a pretty high interest rate on the savings. So it collects a little bit. And I will say I started that about a year ago, and it's been really nice when someone is in need, just to give and not have any. Before I had reservation, I was like, can I afford to do this? But now it's like, I'm not messing with it. This is only going back to that cause. So those of you that are givers that want to, yeah, those of you that are givers that want to give back, I recommend that. It's just a separate account. Don't take it out of the account that, everything else is coming out of, because it will feel, I think most of us wrestle with that. Like, should I be giving this or should I keep it?
Mm-hmm.
So, um,
Absolutely.
if we want to find you, Sam, how can we find you? And you said something about accountability. Do you have a group going on right now where people can get attached to that and come along and play in that space for accountability?
Yes. So I just started a Frugal Families group on my business Facebook page. So you can just search Sam Schaefer NYL, and there is a Frugal Families group. You don't have to be a client of mine or anything like that. I really just, I want to learn. I want to learn from people too. So it's a great exchange of anything from, oh, this store in our town is having a sale on bananas, and anything from that to, oh, you might need an accountant this year for tax season, everything in between that's going to help families move the needle in a healthy way.
Awesome. Very good. Well, we will look you up. Sam Schaefer NYL, you said, on Facebook.
That's correct.
And then we can find the group from there.
Hmm.
Well, very good. Well, thank you for your time, Sam. Really appreciate it. Wish you the best of luck in all things that you are leading, as a mom, wife, and a person in the financial world. So
I appreciate that.
thank you for being a steward of what God has gifted you with. And we'll definitely be in touch. Thanks for being with us.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye.